This is question 3 from the third CSAT sample paper. And in this question, we're basically just asked to find a 3-digit code given 5 pieces of information. So these 5 attempts, we learned from this one that 2 of these 3 digits are correct, but in the wrong places. In this one, none of them are correct. In this one, one's correct and in the correct place. In this one, one is correct and in the wrong place. In this one is correct and again in the wrong place. And something I've noted here is, in order to solve this, we have to assume that the information they're given is basically as concise as possible. So numbers that aren't mentioned aren't correct. So for instance, in 206, it says 2 are correct and in the wrong places. It doesn't say anything about the third. In order to answer the question, we have to assume that the third one is incorrect. And the same goes for these. So in practice, that's something you'd have to realise halfway through the question. So the way the information is worded, it's slightly ambiguous, but it's once you get near the end, you can see why this has to be true. So if you want to have a go at this yourself, pause the video now. Okay, so how are we going to approach this? Well, we're going to have to think about what numbers can go in each of those 3 slots. So here I've got my 3 places, and we'll think about the digits 0 to 9 for each of them, and hopefully we'll be able to eliminate a lot of these and then narrow it down to 1 each. So here is our information that we were given before. I've called them A to E so I can refer back to them, but that's not completely necessary, as long as you remember what you've used at each step. Okay, so what are we going to do first? Because there's several kinds of information. Like this one says which options aren't correct. These ones say which ones are correct and also talk about the places. So what do we want to do first? Well, I think the easiest thing to do first is to eliminate as many options as possible, because that narrows down the choices for the ones that are correct. So let's go through these options, thinking about what is eliminated at each step. So, okay, we're going to eliminate incorrect numbers in each of these columns. One thing I'll also say, so if we look at this first one, it says if we choose 206, 2 of those are correct and in the wrong places. When I say we assume numbers not mentioned are not correct, I'm also assuming that if one of them if say the third number was not only correct but in the correct place, that would have been said. So I'm going to assume that none of these numbers are in the correct place because it doesn't mention that. And again, that's something we have to do in order to be able to answer the question. So if 2 of these are correct and in the wrong places, that means none of these are in the correct place. So we can eliminate 2 for the first column, 0 for the second column, and 6 for the third column. If we look at 7 through 8, it says none of these digits are correct. And if any of them had been correct but in the wrong place, it would have said that, because it said that in the other pieces of information. So that means we can be sure that 7, 3, and 8 don't turn up in any of the 3 slots. So we can eliminate 7 and 3 and 8 from all of them. Now let's look at 682. It says 1 is correct and in the correct place. Well, we don't know which one that is, so we can't eliminate any options at this point. So we can't eliminate 6 from either of these columns, for instance, because for all we know, the 6 here is correct, but for all we know, also it isn't, because it could be one of the other 2 that's correct. Okay, if we look at 614, it says 1 is correct and in the wrong place. And again, I'm assuming if another one had been correct but in the correct place, it would have said so. So that means none of these are correct and in the correct place. So we can eliminate some more options from there. So that means we can eliminate 6 in the first column, and 1 from the second, and 4 from the third. And then if we look at the last one, 780, this is pretty much the same. It says 1 is correct and in the wrong place, so therefore we can assume none of them are correct and in the correct place. In fact, we've already eliminated 7 and 8 from all the columns, but this means we can eliminate 0 from the last column. Okay, so now what's going to happen? Well, now we're going to have to use the rest of the information, which is that some of the numbers are correct. So that means we're basically going to have to place those correct numbers. I've added at the end, we don't want to place too many. So again, I've assumed that this is all the information we have. So if, for instance, looking at this one, we chose, well, suppose we actually chose 682. That's been ruled out because some of these options have been ruled out. But suppose we did choose 682. That would make 3 of them correct and in the correct places. And we're assuming that that isn't what this says, that's incompatible with what this says. We want exactly 1 to be correct and in the correct place. So 682, for instance, isn't allowed because it makes too many correct. Okay, so which piece of information is the easiest to use? Well, one thing to note is we've actually used all the information from B, because that just rules options out. So now let's look at the rest. And if we look at the third one, what I've called C, that 1 is correct and in the correct place, well, that means for each of these we just have to check whether it's possible in one of the columns. Whereas for the others where we don't know what place it's meant to be in, we have to check more than one column. So it's easiest to start with this. And if we do that, let's see, we have to check 6 in the first column. That's not possible, so it's not this one. We have to check 8 in the second column. That's not possible. So that means that it had better be 2 in the last column. Well, that hasn't been ruled out yet. So from C, the last digit has to be 2. And that means we've used all the information from C, except that we do have to be careful about not adding any more correct in the correct place. But we'll come to that at the end. Okay, so this last digit is 2. What does that mean for the other options? Well, if we look at the first one, it means that now 2 is correct but in the wrong place. So that means one of the other 2 digits, 0 or 6, is correct and in the wrong place. So that means this, this and this, so A, D and E, all basically are giving the same kind of information, that one digit is correct and in the wrong place. So we just have to figure out which is the one to use. In fact, if we tried, you could start off trying any of them, but if you tried A or D, you'd see that either 0 or 6 is possible as the second correct option, and either 6, 1 or 4 is possible as the correct option from D. But if we look at E, 7 and 8 have already been ruled out everywhere. So if one of these digits is correct but in the wrong place, it has to be 0. So 0 has to be correct and in the wrong place. To be in the wrong place means being in one of the first 2 boxes, which is okay because those are the only 2 left. And if we look, 0 has been ruled out in this column but not in this column. So that means 0 has to be, that means 0 has to be correct in the first column. And now that means we've used all the information from E and also B and C from before. So what's left is A and D. If we look at A, it said 2 out of 2, 0 and 6 are correct but in the wrong places. And that's what we've already got. We've got 0 is correct in the first place, 2 is correct in the last place. And in order for us not to add too many correct numbers, that means 6 can't be correct. So that means we can rule out 6 from this column. And once we've done that, we've used all the information from A. So now let's look at D. D says 1 out of 6, 1 and 4 is correct but in the wrong place. Okay, so 1 here is in the middle. If it's correct and in the wrong place, it can't be in the middle. So that means it's not that one. And we just ruled out 6 being in the middle, which is the only space left. So that means that 4 has to be correct but in the middle. And if we check in this column, 4 hasn't been ruled out yet. So that means our middle number is 4. And so this is our 3-digit code.